Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intralingo World Lit podcast. My name is Lisa Carter, your host, founder, and creative director of Intralingo. Today, we have the great pleasure to hear from Michelle Grierson, author of the debut novel Becoming Leidah, which is based on Norse and Celtic mythology and some of her own forays into her own personal family history as regards Norway. It's a wonderful conversation. And in this episode, you're actually going to hear from some other voices asking questions, sharing their thoughts. Michelle was kind enough to join us at one of my reading groups, and we thought it would be wonderful to share a broader range of perspectives with you. Thank you for listening, and we do hope you enjoy this conversation. Good. So, Michelle, welcome to the World Lit Collective. I'll just, tell you a little bit about us, which I think I already did a little, but we've been reading together for a couple of years now. And our whole purpose is to explore the world and ourselves through books. So we read all kinds of genres, books from around the world, different cultures, people, way of seeing and being. And that's the whole purpose, is to kind of break out of our usual reading ruts and read different things and not really get stuck in any one rut. So that's the idea. And really a big part of the way we look at books is really just our own personal reactions to books, just that reader response, that what it makes us think and feel. And so it's so exciting when we have the author here to speak with us and, to bounce these thoughts and perspectives and get, real answers to some of the questions that we inevitably have. So thanks again for being here. It's so great. In some ways, this is a personal story just because of your own personal connection. And you talk about blood memory and knowing somehow that, you had Norwegian ancestry and a connection to the land and maybe the mythology and other things. But I'd love to hear you tell us a little bit about that personal part of the story.
So my dad's family is from Norway. And when they came to North America, it was in the 19th century. And they first went to the States, and then they ended up in Saskatchewan. Because they lived in Saskatchewan when I was born, I really didn't know them too well. I only saw my grandmother, I think, 3 times before she passed. But I grew up with stories from my father about, his Norwegian grandparents, and they raised him until he was about 12. So that part of my Norwegian ancestry I knew about, but I didn't really fully understand the connection until I started doing my own research. So I got really interested in ancestry and was curious. And while I was doing that, the story was birthing itself at the same time. And I guess I kind of trusted my intuition a lot of the time. So when I was writing the story, details would come out and I would just be, intuitively allowing them to come out. And then I would get confirmation after details were written. So that was really cool because I thought, oh, how does that happen? Like, how do I know that? Because I've never been there. So how would I know? And then my son and I, when my son was 9, I had the opportunity to go to Norway and actually plan a trip for just him and I. And we were mostly on the water on the western coastline. And I didn't know where my ancestors were exactly from, but I thought I'm just going to trust my gut, and ended up, without knowing it, directly traveling in the path of my ancestry. So that was really neat, because after it was about a 3-week trip, and then we came home, And then I got confirmation from, people that my dad had lost touch with contacted me, and we met, and they had tons of pictures and lots of stories, and they confirmed that yes, indeed, where I was traveling was exactly where our homesteads were. So that was very neat.
That's amazing. That must have been such a special trip.
Yes, it was epic, as my son would say.
Yeah.
It was definitely epic.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. That's so neat. I would love, as we keep talking, for you to share if there's a chance, one of the details that you put in the story without then, realizing until you'd been to the country.
Sure. Yeah.
One other question I want to ask you before I stop hogging you and turn it over to everyone else as well. But one of the things we talk about a lot in the group is that the blurb on a book doesn't always match our experience of the book. And so I love to hear from you when you tell people, yeah, I wrote this book. How do you describe it? What do you say it's about?
So it's always tricky, right? Because you don't want to give spoilers away, but at the same
Yeah.
time, describing it enough to hook people.
Mhm.
So I always say it's about a mother and a daughter. So for me, that's the heart of the story. Very much connected to my own mom, who is right now severely suffering from dementia.
Mm.
So again, hindsight, right? It wasn't until later that I really understood how much I was writing from a personal perspective, the mother-daughter relationship.
Mm.
So I also talk about the fact that, they're outsiders to the village that they are in 19th century Norway, and that the daughter is born different. She's born with blue hands and feet and webbing between her fingers and her toes. And that's usually as far as I go, because that's usually enough for people to go, what? Why? Like, read the book. So yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love that you said that it's about mothers and daughters, because it is, obviously, but I'm not sure it even really emphasizes that on the back cover. That's interesting. I always find that interesting, just the difference, there's so many ways to see a book and to talk about it. So
Yay.
Yeah,
That's
so
great.
thank you, and thank you for writing it, and thank you for being here with us. It was a treat, for me, from page 2 all the way through.
Yay.
I loved it.
Oh,
I loved
wonderful.
it. I'm left with a lot of, I don't know what really happened in the book. So some things that I am left with. What are we talking about when we're talking about the skin? What is that? What is Maiva? Is she half human, half sea creature? Can maybe just start, I have like 75 questions, but I'll stop it. And if there's no answer, I also am open and completely want to honor, if there is no answer and there is no reality with it, then that's okay too.
Yeah. So the book is based on the myth of the Selkie. And I grew up with this myth. So from the time I was a kid, and I'm just learning now how many people have never heard of this myth. Which for me, I was like, what? How could that be? But yeah, so the myth of the Selkie, it's a myth that is quite common to it's Celtic, but it's also common to Greenland, to the Faroe Islands, to Shetland, to the Orkneys, to Ireland. So it's really focused on that part of the world. And it's basically the myth tells the story of a fisherman who finds a Selkie who is half human, half seal. So the myth says that they can come out of the water for a time period and basically take their skin off and become human. If a fisherman finds the skin, then she's obligated to marry him, because he takes the skin and basically steals it from her and hides it. So she has to go with him because that skin is her. That's her essence. There are different versions of the myth. The one version that I'm used to is that she has children with the fisherman, and the children, one of the children finds the skin and returns it to their mother. And then of course she can go back to where she's supposed to be. So that's the myth. And my telling of it, of course, is my invention, but it's based on that myth. So she's half human, half seal.
Okay. Thank you. That's super helpful. And the person she's originally in love with or romantically attracted to, what is that person? What is that entity?
So, well, at the beginning, you don't really know until you see this shapeshifter actually morphing into different animals. And so it's supposed to be representative of the Norse God Odin, who is, kind of the probably most well-known god in the Norse cosmology. And my take on that, because everything that I had ever heard about Odin, again, from childhood and onward, was very much rooted in war and battle and kind of darker stories. And I just wondered, well, he must have loved, right? So I decided that shapeshifter would actually be Odin. And that kind of came organically because I was writing it and I wasn't sure, like, who is this shapeshifter? And then there were details, as I said before, that kind of just came out. And then when I checked, I was like, oh dear. So he only has one eye. Why is that? And matched Odin's story. So I kind of just trusted the gods and let that come through. Because the way that the book came to me, it felt like it came in almost in quilt patches. That's the only way I can really describe it. And I guess, the metaphor of the quilt that Maeva was making also relates, and also the Norns who were, stitching and tearing apart people's lives. And so I guess that's why. The gods decided to give it that way. And my editor, I actually had done some more definitive things in it, and my editor was like, let's pull back at the beginning, because she really wanted the readers to be in kind of this mysterious place, because I mean the whole book is it kind of exists in the in-between. Like everything is sort of in between. Like Maeva's in between the water and the land, and Leidah's in between as well, between her parents, and she's also becoming things. And so that state of liminality, I guess is the word that I would use, is the entire book. So and Hild's identity, we held back on for quite a while, on purpose, because we wanted you to really wonder, like, who is this person and why does she have it in for Maeva? So.
Well, that definitely worked. And just, as you're saying that whole liminality, I think that's what I loved so much about this book, was that I was allowed to be a part of it by figuring it out or by feeling a bit uncertain. And it made me be more engaged as a reader, as opposed to just consuming. And I really liked that. I liked that sort of. It also reminds me too, like, to me, when I was thinking about the book after, there's all this, this continuity, like there is, past, present, future, which actually I have a question about later, because there is no real future. And I'd like to know your thoughts on that. But there's the past, present, and the future, there's gods, humans, and animals. There's just this sort of stretch or this continuity between all of the worlds and all of the things. There's myth and there's reality, and there's somewhere in between Maeva is living. Were you consciously thinking about those sort of trines as well? To me, it feels like there's trines everywhere.
Yeah. So I was very aware that there were threads. I mean, I call them threads, but when I was writing the book, I knew that I wanted the Norse cosmology of time to kind of structure the book, which basically it's kind of like, I always use a blanket when I have one. So it's basically like here's the past, and here's the present, and then here's the future. And so it all layers on top of one another. And so that means all times exist at the same time. It's all one. We think it's like this, but that's just our consciousness. That's the what we can handle. So Norse cosmology would say that, it's not really past, because it kind of sits right beside present. And what's possible, or what's to come, is it written yet? I don't know. So that kind of structured the way that the story was written. And then I almost felt like the myth of the Norns they were holding that blanket. Mm-hmm. And even though there's not a lot of them in the story, there's enough to understand that there's something else at play, that it's not just everyday reality that we're dealing with. And so, the myth is that they sit at the base of Yggdrasil, which is the world tree. And they sit there and they weave, they stretch thread, and they cut thread, and they weave these patterns of reality for all of the 9 worlds, which again is a Norse concept of all these worlds that basically hang off the tree. So that was the image that I was working with, and then that just again threaded itself through all of the details. So Maeva is literally drying up and flaking off and losing her her essence, because she's being forced to be something that she's not. And so she's collecting all these bits of herself and her daughter and trying to grasp what's left of that, and that someday her daughter will be able to look back on this particular concrete thing of this blanket and be able to use it in some magical way. So threes were really important, and it's just a magical number that we see again and again in literature, but it was particularly important about time, and the 3 Norns, and even just the women that are in the book. They're Maeva and Helgar and Hild. So yeah, it was kind of and it came out naturally. Like I wasn't planning it. It just kind of spun itself. So
thank you for the book. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I know this is petty, but there's one thing that I also really liked on page 59. At one point you're describing things, and I don't know if it's just a common tool, but all the words run into one another. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was fantastic, making me feel the oneness of life. And so great technique.
Yeah, I think the reference, if I'm remembering correctly, I do have my book here, but is probably when Leidah is changing. I think is probably the one with that. Yes, yeah. And that was just when I was playing around with space on the page, which I don't know how often. Because again, this is new to me too. I don't know how often publishers allow for us to play with space on the page. I'm a very visual person. So I started to play around with, what would it feel like if suddenly you were everything and nothing at once, and how all the boundaries and all the spaces in between those categories, those words would just disappear, and it would just be this long string of, like water, like a waterfall.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Thank you very much for being here, and congratulations on the book. It's really a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I have lots of things to say, so I'll try to summarize. And I have maybe one question. So I was completely engaged after the first paragraph.
Yay!
It was that good, and it was that well written. And I even remember writing a message to Lisa after, I think it was after the second chapter, precisely to tell her, oh my God, this is so well written. And I'm also loving the story, but it's very well written. But it was just 2 chapters, so I didn't really know that much about the story yet. But the story is really, you were talking about how you threaded the story, and it was extremely well threaded, because it could have gone so many ways, and it could have gone wrong very easily, and I don't think it does at any point. It is that well threaded, or well, in my opinion anyway. I think the words were chosen very carefully all through the book, and that's I think readers should appreciate that too, because books are not just about the story. They are about the story, and they are about the words that have been chosen to write that story, I think. So basic, what I'm trying to say is basically this book has absolutely everything. Words, very well written. Story, amazing. Structure is great. I mean, I understand what you were explaining about the different, the past and the present and the future, and how that is very important in Norse mythology. But I think it was the perfect structure for the book too, because you were talking about your editor telling you about, wanting the book to be in this mysterious place. And I think it is all the time, every single page, even when you give us details, more details that help us understand, even then there's still some mystery. And for me, it was really surprising when we find out not only that Pieter is with or was with Hilde, but that he believes in witchcraft and he asks for help, but he's been telling, and all that we had been offered as readers up to that point was Pieter rejecting, yeah, my wife is weird and my child, special, okay, but yeah, it's okay, everything is okay. That was our perspective, and it turns out he not only does he believe in that, but that he believes that will solve all his problems, so I think that was genius. Let me see what else. Oh, the offering of different perspectives through the book makes the story obviously much richer. And I wanted to tell you that even though I was completely engaged after the first paragraph, you really got me with the chapter of the fox at the very beginning. The very first time that we start, the very first chapter that we know of the shapeshifter, even if we don't know what he is yet, that he's gonna change shapes. And I thought, oh my God, is she gonna give us like the perspective of the animals as well? I don't know why, but I'm into this. I mean, this is getting really, really exciting and good. You know, it was just like, you built this world so well. It was just, I don't know, great. It was genius and magical. So I guess I have a question, if I may.
Yes, please.
I was wondering, I really like the structure, like I said. So I was wondering, from the point of view of the writing process, did you know from the very beginning that that was the way you were going to structure the story, or not? What was there another version in which it was not structured that way, or how did it work?
Yeah, so the structure was real, like it really was there at the beginning. But originally, like the very first draft that my editor and I worked on, everything was written in present tense. So even though there were time flips, I had everything in present tense because in my mind, I wanted everyone to understand that there is only now. But then my editor very wisely said, I think we should put past tense in for the past tense chapters. Because she was worried that people would be very confused if there was no indication of yes, this is a time flip now. So that was, that's one of those signals to the readers, that now you're in the past. But the actual structure of, flipping back and forth between perspectives, that was originally there. And for me, like, Leidah was really the unreliable narrator, because she's a child, and seeing the world through her eyes was just it brought more magic to the book. And it gave more mystery as well, because she really didn't know what was happening, and she kind of builds the suspense for the reader through her eyes. And then the shape shifting, I just started to play around with, like, how many animals could I make him, which was fun because some chapters ended up being really short, but again, I love that on the space on the page is just a few words, and I don't know, I love reading a book like that where it's not just a standard A to B to C to D and everything's kind of laid out for the reader. I like to work a little bit when I read. So I suppose I wrote a book that I'd like to read, I suppose.
Once the book has left your hands and left the editor's hands as well, and comes into our hands as readers, that's a whole process of letting go as well, because we're all going to have our own perspective of what the story means and how it impacts us and what we take from it. What's that like for you as the author?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, actually. So I just went to a book club campfire with a bunch of women that had chosen the book, that are just local to where I live, and that was really, really great to just sit around and hear it, and I just witnessed the whole thing. I wasn't really answering that many questions. I was just watching and listening to kind of the ideas floating back and forth between people. Well, I thought it was like this, and I didn't take it that way. So and people's responses to the characters, like one woman was adamant that Peter, he's a good man. And that a lot of the women in the circle did not want to hear that. No, I think underneath it all, he means well. And yeah, so it's fascinating because the characters are in my head, and they're very they're very, very much a part of me too. So it's interesting to hear what people's responses are to those characters. Like, for instance, Hild, lots of people have kind of painted her as the villain, and I don't think of her as a villain. I just think of her as a woman who really was treated quite poorly by her lover, and doesn't know what to do with all this jealous rage or anger or whatever, and it's coming out in dark ways. But I don't necessarily think she's a villain. So, but that's just me, obviously people are going to interpret in different ways. But yeah, it's been very interesting. It's also interesting to hear people's criticism as well. Like developing a tougher skin about that, and understanding that some, this structure of a book is not for everyone, obviously, because I love ambiguity. I love breadcrumbs left so that I can follow the trail. And some people do not want that. When they read, they want it to be effortless. They want to escape, and they don't want to, flip through and go, where am I? I don't understand. I don't understand what time period I am, So that's fascinating too, to go, okay, so maybe less ambiguity for some people would be better. And yeah, so all good. It's all learning,
Exactly. And you're going to write the book that you write, and you're going to offer the story that you offer. And, as readers, we all just experience it, for what it is, and in our own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I actually, I've heard lots of writers talking about Goodreads, saying it's, Goodreads is not a platform for writers, it's a platform for readers, and the writers need to just, not worry about it. It's a conversation that's for readers. And so I heard that a few times from other writers going, okay, then that makes me feel much more able to be detached, rather, because at the beginning you're just like, oh, what do people think? You're so attached to that. But I'm not so worried about that anymore. It's out there. It's like a kid. You raise your child and you just hope it's going to find its way. So I hope that, Leidah finds her people,
The way Maeve was with Leidah was complex. And I like that, because I think there's so many different choices moms have to make to protect their child, or prepare their child for what's coming, or prepare the child to survive, or to get the child out, or to get the child so society's not attacking them because they have big feet or whatever. So that part of the relationship was really thought-provoking to me.
Yeah, I think with for me, the relationship between Maeva and her daughter, it was so rooted in secrets, because Leidah really didn't understand, anything about who she was or why they had to hide her. I mean, she knew she was different, but she really didn't understand the gravity behind that, the reason and the decision to do that. And for me, and again, I think this is reflective of my own experience with my own mother. I didn't really understand myself until I understood some of the secrets that my mom felt she had to keep. And there's something, I don't know, really profound about discovering those secrets and knowing that she kept them to protect me. And yet it was also the thing that needed to be revealed for me to really understand who I was. And again, I think that comes back to blood memory and, ancestral traumas and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a complicated relationship. And I also think, and this is something that I've seen in my own life, and as well as, in friends' lives, that conventional setup of, which of course that's the time period of what the roles and responsibilities are of a mother and a father, and how that's seen by the child. And so her father could come home after days being away at sea, and he would be seen as the hero and let's play. And he could be really light with her. There's a scene where Maeva is inside the cottage or the cabin, and she's watching her husband, pick Leidah up, and they're spinning around, and they go into the barn and they're playing, and she wants to do that, but she's like, no, because the work will just wait for me, and I have to get all of this done. And I'm the one that needs to keep everything moving forward and everything together and keeping the family, that stitching of literal and figurative of the family unit. And so I know I felt it when I looked at my parents. I would be resentful of my mom, at certain times, because she had to be, no, we need to do this right now. And so I wanted that to be a part of how Leidah experienced her father and her resentment of her mother, because she knew something needed to be revealed and she was resentful of that, but she didn't even know that on a conscious level.
Yeah, and there was, just to highlight that too, there was that one scene where Peter takes her to church and she comes home with the bloody boots, and why did you have to cut her just before we went to church? And I think Maeva basically says to him essentially, okay, next time you do the cutting, and he's like, no. Yeah. Exactly. And that really did just highlight again that the things a mother has to do for the child, and the hands-off sort of role that the father could play. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that Peter was an interesting character because he almost always got it both ways. I mean, he wanted it both ways, and he nearly got it.
Yeah.
He portrayed this good Christian, which he wasn't, the loving husband, which he wasn't, the doting father, which he really wasn't, the honest man, which he wasn't, the friend to Hilde, which he wasn't. And he got away with a lot of stuff for a long time. But then in the end, things sort of caught up with him. Not fast enough, I thought. Not as a criticism to the book, but I started thinking, dude, you really need a kick between the.
Mm-hmm.
And he eventually sort of got it. And he was very, I didn't understand this until later, but he was very hypocritical throughout the whole thing. And so here's this woman that is his prize, and he rapes her. She's half seal. I didn't understand the myth until you explained it. So now it made complete sense that he would have seal finger. I looked that up. That actually really does exist. And then it makes sense that he would have seal finger. And people started asking him, so you have seal finger, what have you been doing? And he's like, nothing. And maybe he didn't kill any seal, but clearly he got seal finger in other ways, maybe during the rape. And so he's become, he went from being this blonde, blue-eyed, nice looking, I can do no harm dude to really the biggest villain. And it happened so subtly that it took a while for me to catch on.
Yeah, I think he's the villain in the book for sure. But like I said, lots of people have tried to argue otherwise, that his intentions are good. And I think he's a man who feels like he is noble, that he's doing noble things. He's taking care of his family, and he's sacrificing, and he's saved Maeva in his mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if she was given to him by the gods, I mean, how can you argue with that?
Can't. Yeah. And you're right. He has the facade that he has, that he uses to convince others of his noble soul. He's very hypocritical. It's not truly what is underneath. And I think he is capable of loving. He has tender moments with his daughter. But ultimately he really didn't see, he didn't see Maeva. He didn't see what she'd been through, and he didn't even see his daughter, really, because why would he, take her to church and not see that she's bleeding through her shoes, and until she gets home, kind of thing. So yeah, he's very self-absorbed, I would say.
And if anyone wants to share, I would like to share, and I would love for you to as well, Michelle. It's like, if there's anything you're going to take away from the book, and what you, Michelle, took away from writing this book.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's wonderful to be invited. The pandemic has made it such a weird year, but also, I don't have anything to compare it to because it's my first book, but definitely things have been maybe not the way that they would normally be. So, thank you. I appreciate it. I love hearing people's responses, and so that's great. And yeah, thank you so much, all of you, for reading the book, even if you only got to page 36. I really appreciate that you had the book. I love that you read the ending. I think that's so brave. I have so many times that where I've picked up a book and I'm like, I just want to know the end, and I've resisted, but I'm gonna do it. I love it. So what would I take away from writing the book? Well, I think for me, it's two things, and I've already mentioned them already, but it's the mother-daughter connection. And this is, again, it's a personal, really, it's very personal for me because my mom doesn't recognize me anymore. Sorry, I'm going to cry. So all of the secrets that I don't know, and I will never know. I really, really appreciate all of those threads that I can't possibly know. Sorry, that's my dog. And so that part, even just the way Maeva fragments in the book, and that she just kind of dissolves. So I didn't know, of course, when I was writing it, that this is where I would be with my mom. And again, I'm always fascinated by the creative process and how much you don't know, and then 2 years later, wow. So I'm very grateful to the gods for that. Yeah, so that for me, that mother-daughter thing, come up here. That mother-daughter thing, she just knows when I'm upset.
I know, I was just gonna say, she knows you're upset.
Yeah. So that's the first thing that I just, there's so much there, and whether or not you have a good relationship or a fraught one, I think there's just so many things to examine. And the second thing is that magic, and just the awareness that there's all these invisible energies and threads and even creatures. That's what I believe. That you get ideas and they kind of float around, and if you're open enough, they drop down and then you're gifted with it. So I often say, well, I don't feel like I wrote the book. I feel like I kind of channeled it, and that the characters knew what they wanted to say, and I just made myself open enough to receive that. So I'm always very aware that there's magic everywhere, and I daily look for it. So the book confirmed that for me.
Amazing. Yeah. I just have to say, as the daughter of someone who passed away from Alzheimer's, I feel you intensely. I understand so much of that. And yeah, I hadn't thought of that in terms of Maeva, but wow, what a incredible thing for you to have in some way processed before you have to live it. Incredible.
That time thing.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing. Lainey.
Yeah, I have something to say about that time thing. So my takeaway is that there you were writing the book in the present, really using the voice of the present, really writing the book in the present, and open and receiving. And then when you go and you step back and you find out that there were those blood memories and there's the thread of the past that actually lives in the present, even when we're not trying. And I'm a big, like, now and presence and try to, but that gift of that ancestral thread is still there, and the Norrens, and that I think there's just something really remarkable and magical for me about hearing your perspective about trying to kind of boots on the ground, make it in the present, and the past through all of these different ways, and I suppose the future as well with your mother and your own life experience. The past and the future found their way in anyway, and really I don't think the Norrens would have had it any other way, right? The other two, the past and the future Norren, are certainly not going to tolerate the center stage of the present. They all three have to exist in order to have it. And that the book came to life in that same way, that the author of the book, the creator of the book, the holder of the magic wanted it to be anchored in wanted it to be in the present. And the book fought its way through, whether that's through Odin or the blood memories or the editor. The book found its way into the trine as well. And I would not ever have known that if you hadn't come and talked about it. And I'm just incredibly grateful to see that perspective. Thank you. This has been magical.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else have a takeaway?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
My takeaway is more related to today's talk and having listened to what Michelle had to say. So my takeaway would be the magical aspect of the book, but not the magical aspect that I mentioned when I talked about the book, but the magical aspect in regards to Michelle, in regards to the book not being as much written as channeled. And I'm sorry, I know a lot of work went into it. I know, and the work with your editor and all of the writing, and I know that I don't intend to say that there was no work in the writing, but it's the book is very different for me. The book is very different now, because before I just thought it was written. I just saw an author sitting down for however many hours and changing words and writing commas and deleting commas and, changing things. And while that was there, there was something else that I'm not sure we would have known if we hadn't had Michelle here tonight. So I really appreciate it, and I thank you and congratulations again. And this was just great and magical too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
beautiful. Yeah, I think it's similar for me. For me, my takeaway is, you know, when I read the book the first time, it was that floating, magical, just ethereal, letting it be what it was, even if I didn't understand it all entirely, and just experiencing it. And then, you know, before talking tonight, I looked at the book again, and I just think that that is one of the biggest gifts of it for me, is just remembering that things are layered. They can be deeper if we take a moment, if I take a moment to, yes, experience it, but then also look at it and listen to it and talk to you. And, you know, just that multi-layered ability to always go a little bit deeper, to understand a little bit more, even if what you understand is that you don't understand, you know, and just that beautiful richness, that depth that I think we can find in this book, but I think I can find in so many more ways in my life if I give it the chance. So thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for coming. Really a pleasure. And I know we're all excited for your next book, whenever that one comes to life. So please, we'll be watching for it for sure. Does anybody else have any final things? Nadesti? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any takeaway because I haven't read the book, but I realized just as going through the discussion today and listening to Michelle, I really like the title, Becoming. And in some way, I'm always becoming. To me, there's never an ending. We're always becoming and doing, as long as I have to remember, you know, all the experiences that I have and everything can. And I say that all the time to my clients. I don't kind of think of it myself, but yeah, so sitting here now, the title is really much more, has more meaning. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've had a few people ask me why that title. And for me, I think we're always becoming, you know, we never fully arrive, right? It's all about experiencing, and those experiences morph inside of us and we become something else. And identity is so fluid. And you know, it was a literal title, you know, Leidah becomes things, but it was also, you know, that idea that she's becoming herself too, and finding that truth that is sometimes hard for us to really understand or even sit with. So thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that about the title.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's not also like becoming Michelle. And, right.
Yeah,
and,
me too.
And you stepping right. And for me as a reader and experiencing it and coming to this evening and hearing all of this, I wonder if it's not also becoming Lainey. Like it's just giving sort of, well, that past, present, future, and each of us is stepping into, and I think coming away from a conversation like this with more possibility, that's then stepping into a future that never was. That future was never going to happen if you didn't come here, show up tonight for us and say the things that you said, and we take it in and hear it and the conversation, and it just, I think it leaves everyone changed. So everyone then, just from this hour and 40 minutes together, is becoming themselves, more themselves, or the next themselves, or the true, the authentic self. So really cool, extra cool.
That was mind blowing. Thank you.
Yeah, mind blowing and true. true. Like, none of us become who we are without the experiences that we have. And this sure was one. Yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle. And I will be in touch about the podcast. And if everyone else can, if you've still got 15 more minutes, we'll share about November. But
all right. Thank you so much, everybody. That was really great. It was really great to hear all your responses.
Thanks for coming and making time for us.
Thank you very much.